All right, welcome back. Here we are in a super fun video. I've had a ton of comments from many of you about shooting the Texas Plinking Challenge, 1,000 yards, 1 MOA. So I'm in Texas and I've got Brandon from Texas Plinking. So Brandon, tell us a little bit about the challenge, what we're gonna do.
It turned out to be a bit of a challenge. It all depends on the equipment you use and how well you know it. But what was about 10 months ago, I only know that because we're on episode 10 now.
Yeah.
So about 10 months ago, we started this challenge where you got 10 shots to hit a 1 MOA plate, which 1 MOA at that range, 10-inch plate.
Yep.
And then it evolved because what I did is I didn't know how much of a challenge it would be. You were the first shooter that ever done it. And so I thought I'd put a little dangling carrot out there and do like a little 1/2 MOA or 5-inch target as well. Turns out people can hit that pretty routinely. Maybe one episode, someone usually can hit it. And so then I started doing this point system to where the shots are worth more early on and they kind of diminish as they go on. But any hit's always impressive. But that's the gist of it. You got a 10-inch plate out there. That's the main one you're going for.
Small target.
1,000 yards, 10-inch plate, 10 shots to do it.
Yep. So we're back in Texas, and as you can tell, I'm going to shoot it with a 14.5-inch 6.5 Creedmoor. So I'm thinking that's the little barrel that could. It's going to be super fun to see how a short 6.5 fares against a 1 MOA plate at 1,000, and then if I connect a 1/2 MOA plate at 1,000. So from here, I'm going to quickly move into and show you what I do at 100 yards to get ready, and then we'll pop into the shooting piece and we'll wrap up at the end with how I perform.
Beautiful.
So what am I going to run for gear on this 1 MOA at 1,000-yard challenge? Well, I thought it'd be fun to bring out something that maybe is a little bit controversial. I've got a 14.5-inch 6.5 Creedmoor barrel in this LMT MWS. This LMT MWS actually is one of the old school. I think I got this maybe 2010. This was my first venture into long-range shooting. I really haven't shot this rifle much recently, but I love putting rounds through it. So almost a brand new 14.5-inch 6.5 Creedmoor barrel. This is 1 7.5-inch twist, so pretty fast twist for a 6.5. For a suppressor, we're running my Surefire 762 SOCOM mini suppressor. You've seen it many times on my channel. I love running this can because it's so versatile. Not the world's quietest cans, but I will be wearing electronic ears the whole time anyway. For an optics package, I'm going to run my Ride-On 3-18 that was sent out to me for use on the channel. You've seen this in many videos. It's a great scope and it seems to perform very well. Optics mount, this is a 1.54-inch mount from Zero Gravity, also sent to me for use on the channel. I really appreciate each of these companies that are helping support my channel, and I'd ask, when you look at your next gear purchase, do you think about supporting those that are helping others in the industry? And then finally, the important piece, what are we going to run for ammo? So for ammo, I'm actually going to shoot a load from Ally Munitions. This is a 130 grain Berger VLDH bullet. And this one, when I looked it up, it's got a G7 BC of 0.288, so it's a very efficient bullet. What I plan to do from here is show you the process of getting ready to shoot this challenge. So from here, we're going to move down to the 100-yard line, where I'm going to show you zeroing this rifle, show you what it's doing for groups, give you a look at the velocity. I'll show you my ballistic app setup, and then we'll come back here to the 1,000-yard line with Texas Plinking and see if I can connect on a 1 MOA plate. Before we go out and shoot 1,000 yards with Texas Plinking, we had to stop by my 100-yard range here. In order to shoot accurately out to distance, you've got to be confident in the velocity out of your rifle, as well as your zero. So that's exactly what we're going to do here. In this first clip, you can see I put my magneto speed on the end of this rifle, and I fired 5 rounds of the Ally Munition, 130 grain load across the chronograph. I'm very happy with the performance. As an average, you can see we got 26.05 feet per second, which is very much acceptable and normal for a 14.5-inch barrel. What I was most excited about, though, was that low extreme spread and that SD under 10. Now, why is that important? You think about extreme spread or SD being large, the more velocity variation you have down at distance equates to a lot of vertical variation that you can't control for as a shooter. So the tighter you can get those velocity numbers with lower SDs and lower extreme spreads, the less variation you will have in vertical spread out to distance. That way, it's going to be much easier to connect on a 10-inch plate out there at 1,000 yards. I fired those 5 rounds on this dot here on the right-hand side. Not that concerned with that group because the magneto speed will do weird things to the end of your rifle. I was using this mainly just to check my zero to make sure I was in the ballpark. Then I removed the magneto speed from my rifle and I fired 5 rounds on the left-hand dot for a group and to check my zero. And as you'll see in this footage, the first 4 rounds were stacking right in there. Really, really awesome performance out of the first 4 rounds. They were stacking right here just on the left-hand side of the dot. And then that fifth round, maybe as a shooter, I got nervous. I was also fighting mirage off this can. It's a very cool evening out here. There's no wind blowing, so I was getting a lot of mirage coming up in front of me. You can actually see in some of these clips I was blowing out of my mouth trying to blow the mirage away, but it would come back so quickly. Hard to see this dot clearly. But overall, the 5 rounds, including the flyer that I pulled off to the right, is going to measure, and I'll put a close-up picture of this, but right at 1.25 inches, or call it 1.25 MOA. Now the first 4 rounds out of this group are all touching. So I'm very confident this 5th round was likely shooter error. And even if it's not, even if it is something up with my rifle or whatever, when they're stacking in there like this, we will be very, very solid out at 1,000 yards. So really happy with my 100-yard performance, happy with my velocity, confident in that number. I'll plug that into my shooter app to get my drop out there at 1,000 yards. Happy with my zero. I believe that'll be good to go. From here, I'm going to zero out the turrets on my scope to make sure they're marked 0, 0. That way I can identify if anything changes in the flight, or if I decide to dial when I get out to Texas for my shot, I can do that accurately starting from a 0 point. So from here, the next time you're going to see me, we're going to be in Texas, and we'll be firing this rifle up on the Texas Plinking 1 MOA at 1,000 challenge. So let's do it. So now that we've got our work done at 100 yards, we've got a solid 0. I know my velocity. I'll go ahead and plug that into my shooter app. I'll plug in at 2,600 feet per second. I'm going to use the G7 BC on this Burger bullet, which is 2.88. And then I'm going to put in the atmospheric conditions for today. When I run those numbers, it's giving me 9.9 mils of elevation. So before we go shooting, I'm going to dial on 9.9 mils of elevation. We've got a pretty decent right to left wind out here today, so I am going to cheat right with my first rounds. I'm going to start a mil to the right and see where we land. So with that, let's move into the shooting piece. So I'm going to try to run my trigger cams to give you a view through the scope of what I'm seeing as the shooter. And then I'm also going to film with my iPhone. But don't forget to check out the actual Texas Plinking video because he will have more camera angles. With that, let's move down to the 1,000-yard line and see if I can connect on the 10-inch plate at 1,000. And then if I do, a 5-inch plate at 1,000. My original footage had a lot of wind noise, so let me just chat through what I'm doing and what I'm seeing as a shooter. That first round landed a bit to the right, so I had too much of a wind hold there at 1 mil. I also felt like my elevation was off just a bit, so I actually came up a 10th. So here I'm going to cut my wind hold back from 1 to about 0.5. That picture in picture, you can see a view of the plates. Very small, so the first 3 rounds were a miss. I'm going to come back down a 10th, and now my 4th round, I'm going to connect.
Oh yeah. Get back. Nice. Is that on 4? Oh yeah. Alright, white 5-inch. 1 second. Alright, I am.
So really happy with putting my 4th round on a 10-inch plate at 1,000 yards. Had a little bit of a downtime to reset the camera, and now I'm going to fire my 6 remaining rounds at a 5-inch plate there at 1,000, and you can see how small that is in that picture. Unfortunately, I'm not going to connect with any of the 6 rounds on the 5-inch plate, but they are all stacking right around that plate.
Man.
Very happy with the accuracy
Right there.
of this rifle.
Some good shooting. Wow. That's sick.
Well, that's the end of the shooting. Thankfully, we connected with our 14.5-inch 6.5 Creedmoor on a 1 MOA plate at 1,000 yards. That's the little barrel that could. Now, really quick, let's talk about my performance and how I felt shooting it. I had a ton of fun. First up, I do want to note, unfortunately, my trigger cam was not recording. That was my fault. I hit the wrong button, so I don't have the through the scope footage that I normally do. I'll speak through what I was doing as a shooter, though. So out of the gate, I dialed on 9.9 mils of elevation. That Ally Munitions 130 grain Burger load was quite flat shooting for such a short barrel. Remember, it was running about 2,600 feet per second. 9.9 mils, that's very much in line with a longer barrel 308. So my first round, I had 9.9 mils of elevation dialed, and I held right 1 mil. I felt like there was a right to left wind out there, so I needed to cheat into that, sent my round down there, and really the round landed pretty much where I was aimed, so I held too much wind. I cut that back to 0.5 or 0.6, and ultimately that's where I made my connection on my 4th round. So 4 rounds to connect with a 10-inch plate at 1,000 yards. Really happy with that performance out of a gas gun. Then the remainder of my rounds, I fired at a 5-inch plate there at 1,000, and that is a tiny target out there at 1,000 yards. Unfortunately, I did not connect with the 5-inch plate, but man, my misses were all right around that plate. Check out the actual Texas Plinking video, and you'll see footage of the actual target to see where my misses were landing. I'm very confident had I stayed on that 10-inch plate, those all would have connected, but that 5-inch, that's a half MOA target. That's a tiny target at that kind of distance and wind. So tough shooting. But ultimately, in summary, I am super excited to connect after 4 rounds. Those were my first rounds out of this rifle beyond 100 yards. So my shooter app was spot on for the elevation that I dialed. The rifle, very accurate, performing very well. And I felt good as a shooter, just a little bit of windage error there. So thanks for watching this video. I've had a ton of fun down here shooting with Brandon from Texas Plinking. If you get the opportunity, I'd encourage you to check out his channel, check out these videos. And if you're up for a challenge, maybe reach out to him and try your hand shooting a 10-inch plate at 1,000 yards. It's challenging, but doable and super fun. So if you've made it this far, thanks for watching my video. I'd ask that you'd help me grow this channel. The way that you can help me is by liking this video, commenting. I'd love to hear down below your thoughts. How did I perform? Should I have done better? Let me know. Finally, subscribe to my channel so that you're in line for my next video drop. If you subscribe, notify yourself because I've got a ton of content just like this in the works. Finally, don't forget to check me out on Instagram at Mountain Smollets America. It's a great place for us to interact. DMs, maybe I can help you out with your long-range journey. So once again, thanks for watching. Stick around to join me in my next video.